it does not begin with sirens. It begins with a paragraph, a short health advisory about an unusual cluster of illness in a city you have heard of, but never visited. You read it, you move on. 11 days later, that same illness is in your country. 16 days later, it is in your county. And the advisories have stopped sounding calm. A respiratory pathogen is spreading worldwide. But this one did not emerge from an animal. It was designed, engineered, to spread easily and to harm severely. This is scenario 0. Today, could you survive an engineered pandemic? Every pandemic in history, until now, has been an accident of nature. A virus crosses from an animal into a human, and natural selection, blind, undirected, shapes how it spreads. Nature is a powerful designer. But nature is not trying. An engineered pathogen is different in one decisive way. It is shaped on purpose. Modern biology can read and write genetic code. In the wrong hands, that same capability can be turned toward making a pathogen do things a natural one rarely would. 3 traits make any pathogen dangerous. Transmissibility, how easily it spreads. Lethality, how often it kills. And the incubation period, how long an infected person spreads it before they feel sick. In nature, these traits tend to trade off against one another. An engineered agent may be designed to defy that trade-off. That last trait is the most dangerous. A natural pathogen that kills quickly often burns out. It disables its hosts before they can spread it far. But a pathogen engineered for a long, silent, contagious incubation spreads invisibly for weeks, seeding itself across the world before the first wave of severe illness even appears. A respiratory pathogen spreads through the air. An infected person breathes, speaks, coughs, and releases tiny particles carrying the agent. Others nearby breathe them in. The more easily the pathogen survives in the air and infects a new host, the faster it moves. Once inhaled, the pathogen enters the cells of the airway. It hijacks each cell's machinery to make copies of itself. Those copies burst out and infect more cells. The immune system detects the invasion and fights back, and much of what we feel as illness is that battle underway. An engineered agent can be shaped to make this process worse. It might bind more tightly to human cells, raising transmissibility. It might evade the immune system's first defenses, buying time to spread. It might be built to resist existing treatments. Each change is a deliberate edit toward greater harm. But here is the constraint that matters. An engineered pathogen is still biology. It still obeys the rules of biology. It can be slowed by the same measures that slow any respiratory disease: distance, clean air, filtration, and time. It is more dangerous than a natural pandemic. It is not supernatural. Hour zero for you is not the release. It is the moment you understand what is happening. The moment the advisories turn serious. And the case numbers stop being someone else's country. Hour 6. The shelves empty fast. In any serious pandemic, the first public response is a surge of buying. Unlike a hurricane, there is no forecast cone and no landfall hour. The trigger is simply fear arriving everywhere at once. The stores are stripped in a day. Hour 24. Public life begins to contract. Schools close. Large gatherings end. Offices send people home. But an engineered pathogen with a long, silent incubation has a cruel property. By the time the closures begin, the agent has already spread invisibly for weeks. The measures are right. They are also late. Hour 48. The healthcare system begins to strain. A high transmissibility, high lethality agent produces severe cases faster than hospitals can absorb them. The limit is not only beds, it is staff. And healthcare workers, exposed first and most often, begin to fall ill themselves. Hour 72. The shape of the crisis is clear. This is not a disaster that passes in 3 days. It is a disaster that builds over months. The first 72 hours are not about surviving an impact. They are about understanding early that you are entering something long and acting before everyone else does. A pandemic is unlike every other scenario on this channel in its shape. An earthquake is an instant. A hurricane is a day. A pandemic is a wave. And a wave that can roll for a year or more. Month 1. The first wave crests. Healthcare is overwhelmed in the hardest hit regions. Care is rationed not by choice, but by arithmetic. And critically, non-pandemic care suffers too. Heart attacks, injuries, chronic conditions all compete for a system that has no room. Month 2. The supply chain erodes. Not from a single break, but from absence. When a large share of the workforce is sick at once, or caring for the sick, or staying home to avoid infection, every system thins. Factories, ports, trucking, utilities all run short-staffed at the same time. Month 4. Society adapts because it must. Work that can be done remotely is. Essential systems are run by those who stay. Treatments improve as doctors learn the disease. And the great hope in any pandemic is the same. A vaccine, or an effective treatment developed and produced at scale. But an engineered pathogen can be designed to make that hope harder to reach. It may resist existing drugs. It may mutate in ways that complicate a vaccine. The honest framing is that the timeline of an engineered pandemic could run longer than the natural one, a wave measured not in months, but in years. How does a pandemic end? Rarely with a single moment. It ends when enough of the population has immunity from a vaccine, from recovery, or from both, that the pathogen can no longer spread freely. But ending does not mean as it was. A severe, prolonged pandemic leaves deep marks. The loss of life is the gravest. But there is also economic damage, interrupted education, strained institutions, and a population carrying the weight of what it lived through. Recovery is real, and it does come. Healthcare systems rebuild their reserves. Supply chains restaff and refill. Economies recover unevenly over years. Human societies have lived through pandemics before and have always, eventually, come through the other side. This is the honest scale of the scenario. An engineered pandemic is among the most serious threats this channel covers, because it is global, sustained, and shaped by intent. But it is also a threat that an informed, prepared individual can meaningfully survive. By understanding the disease, acting early, and outlasting the wave. So, the question this episode has promised to answer: could you survive an engineered pandemic? The honest answer is yes. But surviving a long wave depends on three things: acting early, controlling the air you breathe, and being able to outlast the crowded weeks. First, act before the crowd. In a pandemic, the dangerous window is the gap between when the threat is clear and when everyone reacts. If you recognise a serious pandemic early from credible health authorities and quietly prepare while shelves are still full, you avoid both the shortages and the crowded, high-exposure panic. Second, control the air. An airborne pathogen spreads through shared indoor air. The defences are concrete. A well-fitted respirator, a real one, not a cloth covering, when you must be in crowded indoor spaces. Ventilation, air filtration, and during the peak of a wave, simply reducing the number of indoor spaces you share with others. Third, the familiar Scenario Zero kit still applies because a pandemic thins the supply chain beneath you. Water. Shelf-stable food for several weeks so you can avoid crowded stores during a peak. A hand crank radio. Flashlights and batteries. A full first aid kit. A thermometer and basic fever care. And, above all, a long supply, 90 days or more, of any essential medication, because routine pharmacy access is exactly what a pandemic disrupts. And the last thing, as always, is not a supply. It is community, though a pandemic reshapes what that means. You support each other, not by gathering, but by coordinating. Checking on the isolated and the elderly by phone. Sharing supplies without sharing air. Pooling accurate information against the flood of rumour. The neighbourhood that looks after its own carefully is the one that comes through whole. How likely is an engineered pandemic? This is the hardest probability on the channel, to state honestly, because it does not depend on geology or weather. It depends on human capability and human intent. The capability is the concerning trend. The tools of biology grow more powerful, cheaper, and more widely available every year. What once required a national programme moves, over time, within reach of smaller groups. This is why biosecurity experts treat the engineered pathogen as a serious long-term concern. But the honest framing includes the other side. The same science that makes the threat possible also makes the defence possible. Faster vaccines, better detection, stronger global monitoring. And a deliberate attack requires not just capability, but intent, which remains, thankfully, rare. The scenario is plausible enough to prepare for, and the preparations, as always, are the same ones that protect you from the far more common natural outbreak. We do not run this channel to scare you. We run it because the most useful question a person can sit with, periodically, calmly, without panic, is, what would I actually do? Not in theory. In the week the advisories stop sounding calm. If you found this scenario useful, subscribe to Scenario Zero. We are going to spend a lot of time in the dark hypothetical, so that, in the bright real, you are slightly more ready than you were this morning.